Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this month's webinar with Pia Wiche, directly from Chile, to speak with us today. Pia has worked in LCA for 14 years in 3 continents. She's been in academia and the private sector, supporting decision makers in governments, cities, businesses, and organizations. And we're really happy to have her with us today. Questions, please put in the Q&A, and our data visualization specialist, Tess Konovich, will ask them for you at the end. So take it away, Pia.
Thanks, Holly. And hi, everyone. It's really exciting to be here, sharing a few crazy stuff we have invented over the years to communicate LCA results to humans. So like the regular human, not the superhuman that we are at the LCA community, where we can understand these vast amounts of very complicated data, but the regular human, the human that is there, like in the company every day, like with major fire drills going on all the time, and that they have a very small amount of time to understand this critical data to make some decision that will affect the lives of thousands of perhaps millions of consumers. So I hope that this presentation adds value to you, and I will be very, very happy to answer as many questions as I can over the time span that we have today. For today, we have the following menu. First, we're going to be talking a little bit about comparing results to something familiar, explaining impact categories and comparing to alternatives. So how do we bring this very unfamiliar, this very weird concept that we usually deal with to something that we can relate to? Then we're going to be seeing a couple of ideas on showing data in a meaningful way, especially when representing hotspots and comparing products, and some general guidelines for communicating effectively. And that's some of the learnings that we've had over the years to really get this message across. So let's start with why do this? Why take all the trouble in doing things differently than we usually do them? It's because we want to ensure the results are really understood very, very, very quickly so that they're used correctly. And I think that all of us at some point of our careers have seen a client or a stakeholder look at our results and getting to the absolutely wrong conclusion. And it reminds me, if you ever watched Lucifer, it was a series in Netflix. It was about the devil going to therapy. And every time he went to therapy, the therapist would say something. And he said like, oh yeah, now I get it. And it was like the completely opposite idea that the therapist was trying to get across. So we don't want to have this dynamic with our clients, right? We want them to use the LCA data properly so that they can make better decisions for the environment and for society, and also for their business, right? So let's start with, what does it mean? I mean, this is the face of every client when they look at the LCA results for the first time. When you put that slide on and they look at all of this stuff and it's like, what? So let's see how to put impacts into perspective. We're gonna be working with an example for the LCA for refurbished phone. This is one of our favorite examples because not a lot of people have worked on refurbished phones or appliances, and our work was kind of groundbreaking when it came out a few years ago. And here's the very, very simplified, where's my mouse? The very simplified life cycle of this product. So you basically buy parts and then put them into an old product, and then you distribute them, use them, and the phone finally breaks in 3 years' time or whatnot. And here's the table with the impact values. So we have the regular stuff, right? The things that we know about: climate change, water consumption. We use recipe for this one. So mineral resource scarcity and ionizing radiation. And this one, the one at the bottom, sounds kind of dangerous, right? because fossil resource scarcity is like, okay, I can totally relate to this one. But then ionizing radiation is like, whoa, this is radioactive. Um, and that was very, very fun to work with. And you see on the table already something a little bit different, because we tend to report values with the lowest, the reported, and the highest. So we have one table of results where we put the average result that the software will throw at you. But then we use uncertainty to say what's the lowest and the highest value that this could have, considering the uncertainty of the result. So this is already something a little bit different that we do. And we totally recommend to do this as well. But for a client, I mean, for anyone who's not an LCA practitioner, you look at this thing and it's like, oh my god, it's full of numbers. Like, there's stuff I don't get here. So let's see how we worked with this. First of all, what on earth is it's a becquerel uh, equivalent? I mean, this is very weird. And wait, why does this phone have ionizing radiation? I'm not gonna buy this thing. So that's the first reaction that we got, and we actually got this from the client, so from the owner of the phone, right? So we thought, let's communicate so that people understand. And first of all, and I'm going to be repeating this again in the presentation, but first of all, when we write a paper, we kind of pay for the square inch, right, the square centimeter, and we don't really have a lot of space. But when we write a report, we can be as creative as we want, because there's no limitation. I mean, having a 50-page PDF and a 10-page PDF, it's going to be the same PDF. I mean, it's just a few megabytes more. So what we did in this particular case, because the audience of our client, the clients of our client, they were young people. We thought, okay, we're going to be very graphic with this so that these young consumers understand the information. Here you have an example. We had, first of all, we had like this one pager, which was double page, right? It was one view for each impact category. And here you see water consumption. And our designer, who is in the attendees, we absolutely adore, Crystal. She produced all of these images for our client, which are just absolutely perfect, where you have the water coming into the phone and the water inside of the phone. So it kind of gives you an idea that there's water somehow embedded into this phone, which is absolutely dry, right? It's a dry product, but there's water into it somehow. And there's a little description of the impact category. So what does it mean? And all of this is in Spanish, and I'm sorry about that, but this project was in Spanish. We also have a comparison with an everyday object or activity. So 3 years of using this phone, electricity, and the whole thing are equivalent to roughly 16 and a half days of showering. And there's some extra details here. So here's the actual amount for the impact category and how it was calculated for the shower. So for 15-minute showers. And you also have the graph of results for the water category, but divided in a very different way. So in life cycle assessment, we are very used to saying, oh, well, the upstream and the core and the downstream, or we say like, production and then distribution, use and end of life. But that doesn't make any sense whatsoever in anywhere in the world which is not a life cycle assessment community. So we have kind of turned around the results, and we show them by something that we have called manageable objects. And in this particular case, they were the parts that they were buying for the phones, and the distribution and the recharging of the phone and whatnot. So these are things that the client can actually manage. This is why we call them manageable objects. So when they look at the graphs, they know, okay, if we want to manage water, we have to look at the battery. So, and now well, you saw an example with a shower for the water category, but we have other examples for other impact categories. So for mineral resources, we compared with a silver ring because it's a usual thing to buy. I mean, many young girls wear silver rings in this market. And so if you understand that this refurbished phone is equivalent in mineral resources to 2% of a silver ring, then you say, oh, wow, well, the impact is not really that much. Uh, for water eutrophication, we used area fertilized. So we used square meters of grass that was fertilized because people have lunch in parks and they know grass. So we thought, okay, 3 years of this phone is kind of equivalent to fertilizing 1 square meter of grass. And that's not a lot, right? And that's a way of also showing that the impact of the product is not that big, which is important when you want to make comparisons, when you want to understand, when you want your client to understand the actual impact. Because there's something funny that happens. I mean, when people hear the word environmental impact, they panic immediately. Like, it's instantaneous. It doesn't matter if the impact is big or small, they're gonna panic. Whatever is not zero, it's gonna make them freak out completely. So when you show them the results in a way that they can compare to something that they actually know about, it helps them understand that, oh, well, it's not that much. It's controllable. And then we have the Dachshund. And this is a funny story, but we thought, okay, ionizing radiation. I mean, how do we make this understandable? This is completely like out of the normal, right? And so we had our our data analyst Danilo, who is a physicist, uh, to study ionizing radiation until his eyes turned blue, so that he understood every detail. And we told him, I mean, how do we compare it? And the truth is that we are all a little bit radioactive. It's like that song, we're all made of stars. We're all a little bit radioactive. Ever since the testing began with the atomic bomb and they started bombing different places on the planet, we all started acquiring atoms that were radioactive. And now, actually, our radioactivity is proportional to our weight, to the weight of the thing. Anything that was born after the 50s, right? This rule applies to anything born after that time. And we thought, okay, so we need to compare it to something that is roughly 5 kilograms. What is cute and weighs roughly 5 kilograms? And we started looking at puppies, at dogs, and the only one that kind of fit the bill was the Dachshund, which is a little bit ironic because I'm a big animal lover. I have a great relationship with all of animals, except the Dachshund. But you don't design for the specific case, right? You design for the general audience, and most people will have a good relationship with one of these little dogs, and will be able to have one of these without the dog wanting to like eat you immediately. So we chose the Dachshund, and that's how this little fella came into our regular repertoire of elements that we use to communicate LCA results. Images help a lot, and all of the graphics that you are seeing in the presentation are designed by, most of them are designed by our designer Crystal, who does a fantastic job at making things simple with images. However, if you're not great at designing pictures, right, you can also use analogies in writing. And let's go, for example, in land use for a fungi-based meat patty. Well, not meat patty, but a patty compared to a meat-based patty. So you can talk about reduction. You can say, well, a fungi-based patty uses 98% less land than a meat-based patty. And that's understandable, right? That's still text, uses very little space, and easy to communicate. You can also talk about an increase. You can say that the meat-based patty uses 54 times more land than a fungi-based patty. And here there's a point that I want to make. Many times we've seen people say that this thing has 20 times less impact than something else. And to be truly honest, I don't understand that. When you talk about times, it should be always times more, because 1 time less is already 0. So 2 times less is something that my brain cannot compute. Percentages can be used as less or more, but times should always be used as more. You can talk about an absolute, right? You can say that one type of patty, that the meat-based one, uses 60 square meters versus a little over 1 meter for the fungi-based. Or you can even get a little bit more creative with that information and use an analogy. And this one, we totally have to give a shout out to our colleague Danilo, because he came up with this one. And he said the land used for 1 kilogram of meat-based patties is equivalent to a 2-bedroom apartment versus a small dining table used for 1 kilogram of fungi-based patty. So even if the numbers don't make sense, I mean, comparing a small dining table to a 2-bedroom apartment is gonna make sense for the consumer. And this is the kind of thing that we do that helps us communicate. Let's see how to show data. And if I'm forgetting any details, please, Danilo, who is sitting by my side, just remind me, please, because I think I'm going too fast with this. Let's see a typical LCA result. So this is impacts for a 4-ounce patty for Irish beef, Brazilian beef, and vegetarian ingredients across 16 impact categories. And this is what we would usually see. So it's very compact, which is great. It has a lot of information, which is also great. So we have 16 impact categories. We have 3 types of products, right? And even within the products, we have different processes that come with these products. And this is great for an academic setting because it uses very little space and it gives a lot of information. However, for a human, for a human outside of our community, it might be a little bit daunting. They're gonna have to start by understanding like the whole structure and the shortened words they're not familiar with, and there's just so much information in the graphs that it's very, very hard to come to a conclusion quickly. So a way to come around this problem, right, is to using smarter groups. And this basically means putting less information on one site. You can have this for 3 different products, or you can have this one product. Now, the advantage of separating the products in this case, because here you have a bunch of different dimensions. So you have the impact categories, you have the products, and you also have processes. When you just focus on less dimensions, in this case, only one product and the impact categories, and you leave and with the processes, but only for one product, then it's easier for the eye to process the information and say, okay, the most important thing here is ingredients. So the biggest bars are these very light green bars. And probably this is the most important thing for me to manage right now. They are also fewer processes. So here you have, I don't know, 4, 16, 18 processes. Here you only have 3. So ingredients, production, packing. And this is the magic of using the manageable objects, because it's manageable. So you get the relevant information in your eye. You kind of give the information little by little so that the person who is listening to this information, who is reading this information, can get to the same conclusions as you. Because as an analyst, we actually did this. When we were analyzing data, we started at some point with a very broad picture, and then we started double clicking on everything, and we came to this. And we found it totally interesting because we did the process of going from a very broad scope to a very narrow one, a very specific one, to see the details. So when presenting information to a non-technical audience, it could be a good idea to do the same process with images. To start very with the big picture, and then to start showing details little by little. In this case, the conclusion is very clear. Focus on ingredients or focus on production, but do not waste your time on packing. Packing is very little of the impact. You're not going to win a lot by managing this, by making any changes here. Sometimes it's less than 1% of the impacts. So even if you reduce 100% of the impacts related to packing, that is going to result in tops an 11% reduction in the water category and less reduction in the other category. But here's the big stuff. So ingredients are a big issue with this product. Now, focus always on what matters. Okay, as analysts, I know that it's enthralling to look at how the energy production in China is affecting this pear production in Argentina. However, for the client, it's not really useful. We tend to focus on showing impacts that give at least 10% of the contribution to any impact category. And we do that using a mix of a table and a graph. So here's an example. Their relative impacts for activities with more than 10% of contribution. We have ingredients, we have production, and we have packing. We don't have all of the ingredients, we just have A, B, and C. We don't have all of the production processes, we have just X and Y. And we don't have all of the packaging, we only have one of the materials of the packaging. Why? Because in these ingredients and processes and materials, we find at least 10% of the impacts for at least one of the impact categories. So if I want to manage climate change, I'm going to focus on ingredient A. It's giving me 79% of the impacts to climate change. If I want to focus on water use, I'm probably going to also focus on ingredient A, but I could also do something about packaging material 1. So this is a very simple way. And also if you look at it like top down, right, from the top to the bottom, it's very easy to see, okay, ingredient A, if I can solve ingredient A, if I can change this one for a similar one that is, I don't know, organic or bio or has less environmental impact for any reason, then I'm going to be solving most of the environmental impacts for most of the impact categories. And that's very simple. And at the end of the day, that's what the client wants to see. Unfortunately, it breaks my heart, but most clients don't really care about how hard we worked on their projects. What they really want to know is, what do I do next? Thanks for your information. What now? And this is a way of telling them, what now? Okay, so we did this analysis, we looked at all of your results, we were really good at doing this, and now what you really need to do is focus on ingredient A and B. That's it. And that brings all of the complexity of the LCA. Remember that your client was living through this process with you. They had to give you thousands of data points so that you could calculate these numbers. But after all of that complexity, after months of working together, after many meetings, after getting lost in the middle and really not knowing why they hired you, Once you show this and you tell them focus on ingredients A and B, it's like, thank God. Like they arrived somewhere. Now they know what to do. Now they own the data. Now they're going to be proudly bragging to their colleagues that they were smart enough to hire you and to do this thing called LCA that no one understood or knew about before. But now they know that if they want to reduce their environmental impacts, A and B, and they can give a direction to their teams. Do we have any urgent questions up to now?
Nothing urgent right now that I think.
Great. Thanks a lot. Another way of doing this is comparing products one impact at a time. So let's say we have global warming potential. Of course, everyone wants to know this because this was the carbon footprint. And you're comparing two products, product A and product B. And you have the contribution for the ingredients, the production, and the packaging by life cycle stage, right? Or you could do it by process with more than 10% of the impact. And you can compare for ingredient A in product A, you have 30% contribution. Ingredient A for product B provides 28% of this carbon footprint. Now, ingredient C gives you 29 and 37% of the impact for each of the products. So you sort of do a deeper dive, not a completely deep dive, but a deeper dive, also focusing on the hotspots or the ingredients. And this graph, I'm going to tell the story because this graph actually came after a discussion we had with one of our critical reviewers. So we had another graph for this project, and he was kind of not satisfied by it. He was an academic. He wasn't satisfied by the way we were showing the data. And we came up with this model that really satisfied him and helped the client understand the information better. And it's also very nice to look at. So it's very simple, doesn't have a lot of information, but it's the information you need to actually make decisions. And I'm telling the story because many times also we don't really have either the resources or the time, or perhaps we don't have the client interest to do a critical review. But our recommendation is to always strive to get one. From the moment that you're selling this project, from the moment that you're starting with your thesis in university, try to get either resources from the client to pay for a critical review, or volunteers in the shape of other academics that know more than you that could critically review your thesis or your project. Because there's so much to be learned at each of these critical reviews. Every time we have a critical review, in every project, we learn something, we improve something. And this is because everyone is creative and more brains think more. So it's really a great process to have. And also, I mean, it's kind of scary because someone's checking your work, but it's very positive. At the end of the day, it gives you better results. Another thing that we do a little bit different is using uncertainty a lot. And we started this presentation already showing what the minimum and maximum values would be with the uncertainty, and we report on that. But we also use it for making comparisons. So let's look first at the relative global warming potential for 1 kilo product. So we have a fungi-based burger patty, fungi-based meatballs, and these were the products that we were analyzing. And this is other plant-based burger patties. So if you look at the bars, so if we didn't really have the bars, right? We only had the dots, and we say this is 100%, and this one's 115, and this one's 120. We would probably say, oh no, the plant-based ones have a 20% more impact than the burger patty. And it's actually not so true, because if you look at how the uncertainty bars overlap, that means that you can really make a clear decision, a clear definition on what is bigger than what else. Because of the uncertainty, you don't really know where this dot is. This is just an average, but it could be anywhere really. within the bar, right? With a 95% confidence. And so you can't really tell which one is bigger than the other one. But in the second graph, if we look at land occupation for a kilogram product, then it's very clear. So here we don't really have a ton of uncertainty, or at least the bars don't really overlap here. So you can actually see that the products that we were analyzing actually do use less land than other plant-based products that are in the same category. And this is important for the client because many clients are going to be using this information to make marketing statements, to actually go out to the public and say our product is best. And when they do that, it would be great if we help them have a statement that doesn't get them into legal trouble. And that's always our concern. How do we protect our clients from a legal perspective? And this is why we always use uncertainty. Sometimes it's hard to calculate. Sometimes the results don't look as nice, but it's important because when you're gonna go out to the public, it has to be something that you're 95% sure that it's true. And this is why we do it. So remember, when the bars overlap, there's no clear answer. But when they don't, then you're a little bit more sure of what is going on. And there's also the matter of readability. And here we're going to be talking about color. So I'm going back to this graph that I've already shown. And also, big shout out to Crystal, our designer, because we take care in using colors that are readable by everyone. Which means considering also how people with anomalies are going to be looking at this. So people perceive colors differently. We have daltonism, that is a very, very well studied distortion we could see, or a different version of how we perceive colors. But the important thing is that the colors will be clearly understood and differentiated in a graph. So this is more or less the story of when academic publications didn't really have colors. So if we have 3 types of gray that are very similar, then the reader is not going to be able to differentiate, okay, where does this bar end and where does it begin? So more than the aesthetic value of it, it's important that this is darker and this is lighter and this is a completely different color, so that people will understand the information. And this is something to bear in mind when choosing colors. And I believe I remember another brown bag seminar where someone came and spoke about this very deeply. So just another tip for designing your graphs. And already near the end, all of this is a team effort. Many times our reality as life cycle practitioners is that we're alone. We're mostly alone. We do the whole thing. We build the inventory. We do the results. We play with the software, and then we try to do the best graphs possible. And we also have to write a paper. And we're not necessarily great at each of these things. But having understandable results and getting to all of these things that we've created has actually required many perspectives. We have our colleague Barbara. She is a translator. She works in administrative processes here at ECOED, and she's always asking things like, what does it mean? I mean, she knows nothing about LCA. She math, not her thing. She's a woman of letters and writing. So she's always asking, okay, but what does that mean? I mean, is there a simpler way of saying it? I don't really get it. And if she doesn't get it, I mean, we have to rewrite it because we want everyone to get it, not just the people who know math. Danilo is usually kind of coming up with how will it be used and how should it be used? And now these two things are different. And especially, how could it be misused? So you need someone in the team to tell you, like, to be devil's advocate and say, okay, but people could actually use these results in a twisted way. How do we avoid twisting? How do we write this so that twisting is nearly impossible? And that's always the goal. Felipe, our LCA practitioner, he's always like, he's the guy like doing the numbers all the time, right? So he's always like, is this technically correct? Is it complete? Is it accurate? Is it transparent? Does this really reflect our result? And Crystal, our designer, is like, how will it be perceived? I mean, is it harmonious? Can the daltonics understand? Is this the right figure to represent this thing that we want to say? And I'm always like, how are they going to read into this? And what do they want them? What do we want them to read from this? I mean, what do we want them to read from the results? Because the results are saying something, and we should get the client to understand the same thing that the results are actually saying. That's her job as analysts, to do the analysis. So each of our perspectives, and and for those that are old enough, we were having some fun while making this slide because it was like Captain Planet, right? It's like earth and wind and fire and whatnot, art. But each of our perspectives is bringing something different to the table. And if you see, we don't necessarily only have LCA practitioners here. We have a designer, we have a translator, we have a physicist. So it's all very different. And each of our perspectives is improving the way that we deliver the message. And to finalize, perhaps a few guidelines for effective communication. First of all, have a clear objective. What are you trying to convey? It's not just about putting the results out there, unless that's actually the goal. Sometimes the goal is just to put the results out there, and if that is the case, then it should be done with as much precision as possible, as much detail as possible. So what is the objective of this report you're writing, this paper? Sometimes, many times, when defining the objective, a lot of the work that we've done has to be kicked out of the report because it doesn't really build to the objective. Consider multiple perspectives. How will the message be perceived? And here, a great idea is always to ask mom or grandmother or someone in the family who is totally disconnected from all of this to read your results. How are they understanding the information? Are they understanding the information? Like that's step number one, right? And if not, I mean, it has to be fixed. Brainstorm. Try out different variations. We dedicate so much time to building the inventory, and then we spend a ton of time in the software trying to figure out the results and everything. And by the time we get to stage 4, right, when we have to do the recommendations and do the interpretation, we are kind of out of time. But that's exactly the point where we need to spend a lot of time to brainstorm and try out different variations of the results of how they're shown, so that it makes sense to the people who are going to read this. Tell a story. Go one step at a time. Don't just don't just tell the end of the joke. You know, don't just show the very detailed. Go step by step. It's like, once upon a time, there was an LCA about this. And the LCA showed that this was very nice for the environment. However, within that very nice thing, there were major contributors to the impact. And those contributions come from such and such. So tell a story, because telling a story, it's going to use a little bit more space, but the client needs to own the result. If they don't know the story, if they don't know how to get from A to Z, then they're not going to be able to justify these results to management, to their own clients, or to themselves, and they're not going to use it. Our results are a stepping stone into generating positive change in the world. But we can't forget that we are just the stepping stone. The actual change is going to happen at the client. It's going to happen when that manager gives the instruction to the team to change that process, to set a goal, to do something differently. and when the team actually does it different. So that's when change actually happens, when the team does it differently. And for that to happen, our results should be trustworthy, they should be understood, and they should be applicable in the current context of the client. So by going one step at a time, we're actually helping the client use the story of the data to justify the results. Remove the clutter. Focus just on what matters most for decision making. Connect. Remember to use concepts that are familiar to the audience, like a puppy. Be precise, but show the uncertainty. It gives confidence in your results, and it's also more transparent. And remember to, as far as you can, get a diversified team so that you can get better results. And finally, going into the questions, I have a question for the audience. Do you understand this?
Thank you, Pia, for such a well-communicated and practical and helpful presentation. There are a lot of questions, and Earthshift Global's data visualization specialist, Tess Konovich, will ask them for us. Take it away, Tess.
Well, thank you, Pia. This is something I'm very passionate about. I really enjoyed your presentation. But let's get into the questions. So a lot of these questions also come with compliments, so I'm going to read both. So the first is, Pia, this is great. Yay. Here's the question. Do you include the Dachshund? I should know this. I love dogs. Dachshund and shower equivalencies in ISO compliant studies? And do you ever get pushback from reviewers?
Yes, we do include them in ISO compliant studies. All of our studies are ISO compliant. They all get critical reviews. And yes, we have gotten pushback from reviewers. However, because in general, we get pushback from academic reviewers, not really from the company that are reviewing, because they're just not used to the format. We've also gotten pushback for showing results in terms of manageable objects instead of like the stages. So what we do is that we do everything in a very academic format. So we have annexes where we have the results by lifecycle stage. And then in the report, we have the results by manageable object, because we know that that's going to be more useful for the client. But all of our studies have gotten their reviews and they've been accepted eventually. So it's a matter of justifying well why we're doing this.
Thank you. I've experienced trying out something new and getting some pushback, so that I really am glad that question was asked. The next question that I'm going to go to is, what pictorial comparison do you like to use for climate change?
Oh, great, Lisa. So we usually use kilometers driven by car. Almost everyone drives a car. So if you have enough kilometers, you're going to say, oh my God, that's like a trip to the beach or something. That's kind of far away for, I don't know, an ice cream. So that's maybe too much. But it helps. It helps. So kilometers. Also because climate change is usually measured in other similar products, when available, we use other measurements from similar products to compare, to do benchmarks. But that is usually only available for climate change, because the other categories usually don't get reported or measured.
And someone just commented, very nice presentation, and I understand all you have said. So to answer your question, we have one answer for that. But we'll go back to questions. Thank you for your vibrant presentation. How much time in proportion, I'm imagining in proportion to the actual like math and behind the scenes work, do you use for doing and preparing this kind of interpretation with day life examples, images, analogies?
Well, the first times we did it, it took a lot of time, and we invested in it. We actually did projects that were on cost. We didn't really earn anything, but we didn't care because we love what we do, and we just wanted to bring science forward. So we put up our set of like comparisons, of regular comparisons, and from then we have continued to use them because they're useful for almost every project. And sometimes we've had to change them, but we already know how to do it. So there's the choosing of the thing that you're going to be comparing with, and there's also the generation of the method of comparison, because you have to have comparisons that are true to each other. So the way that you're measuring impact for your benchmark has to be similar to the way that you measure impact for the product that you're assessing. So those are 2 steps, but now it's easier. The first times were kind of hard.
Thank you. I'm excited about this question. So are there any questions that you ask yourself when you put together graphics or text about the results?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, that's the first thing. And the question that I usually ask is, how is this going to be understood by the client? And because I do in the team, I'm the one who does like all of the client relation. So I already kind of know the psyche of my clients. So I can more or less know how they're going to understand this graphic information, how they're going to receive it. So that's the first thing that I ask.
Thank you. This next question is about explaining eco indicators. So it's how to explain eco indicators that you're using. Typically, this is confusing. For instance, the scale and recipe. And the user wants to know about like graphical representation of this.
Well, Catherine, this is really interesting because usually we have people using millipoints in recipe when they're doing eco design. So when people come to me confused about the millipoints, I actually explain to them what's midpoint and endpoint in a very simple way, so that they understand that the millipoint is this aggregated thing that is mixing all of the results, and that is usually just useful at saying something is bigger than the other one, but not how much. So I want to drive them to understanding the differences between aggregated results and disaggregated results. And it usually works pretty well.
Thank you. We have about 7 more questions, so we're getting through them. Thank you so much. When you consider uncertainty in comparisons, do you include correlation?
That's an interesting one. We consider uncertainty. We do the Monte Carlos for that. Correlation is something a little bit different. So correlation is when one variable is correlated to the other one. We usually try to stay away from correlation if we can. We try to go for causation. Because we're working in life cycle assessment, we have the causation, we have the whole tree, so we don't really need to step into correlation. And if there's at any point a correlation that is apparent, we actually point it out. So I can't remember an example right now, but we usually do this. When we find that there's something that's correlation and that could be misleading to the person who is listening to the information, we tell them, this is correlation, this is not causation. So one thing is growing, the other one is also growing, but they might not be related at all. We need more data to understand this.
Thank you. I'm excited about this one. So is there a visual you had to stop using because of too many misconceptions in the results?
Oh wow, I do not need those.
Mhm.
I'm gonna need help in thinking about this. Actually, I do have an example, because I asked the audience, this is a trick question, if you understood that, because we're actually trying to move into this. Haha. Many times we see the carbon footprint communicated like CO2. This causes a lot of misconceptions in the general audience. They think that it's only CO2. So when they start hearing about methane and all of the other gases, they are very, very much confused. We would like to know your opinion, because we are considering starting to use this second symbol with the E, with the equivalent, in all of our graphics, so that it's very clear that we're speaking about a carbon footprint and not about an amount of CO2 gas. So maybe, Giovanni, I'm shooting back a question at you, but this is a confusing one.
Well, thank you. The next question, and then if anyone wants to answer Pia's question, you can do so in the questions or in the chat, and then I can read them and communicate, and Pia can see them too. So this next question is, where or when within a stage gate process or broader decision making would these examples be applied?
Okay, now I get it. Well, the moment in decision making where our results are usually applied is one of two. The first one, normally, is actually in deciding what to communicate to the client. So usually we get clients that are participating in bids that need to present results like this, like carbon footprints and so on. And so our results get used to understand whether they can continue to bid or whether they need to make any changes in their process. So that's like stage number one. Can we continue to sell with this result? Stage number two is where we're going to make, are we going to make changes? And so it depends on the results. And this is where they actually use LCA results to make like internal decision making. And the third point is when deciding what to communicate to the audience. There's so many categories to choose from, right? And then they need help in deciding which of the categories are important for their own product category to be communicated. So those are the typical 3 points of decision making within the companies where our results get used.
Thank you. Here's more of a specific question. So what is your experience in using an aggregated single score like the PEF single score in communicating results?
Well, I gotta tell you, Julia, in 14 years, I've only used them once. I tried to go for the disaggregated ones because the single score depends on very many things and that people do not really understand. And my goal as an analyst and the goal of our team is to provide transparent information so that the decision maker will be informed when making that decision. Unfortunately, single scores hide much of the complexity and many of the trade-offs that happen in a regular life cycle. So we try not to use them actually. However, they were pretty useful when we had one case where one alternative was always better than the other one. So there were no trade-offs. There was a very clear winner. And then we used a single score just to simplify all of the graphs because really they couldn't go wrong. I mean, it was a no-brainer. So we used a single score just to make it like cuter, nicer, I don't know, sexier. But that was it.
Well, thank you. We have a few minutes left, and I think we can get through the last few. You're answering these so nicely and efficiently. The next is phrased as a question, but it is a statement. I think it's supposed to be is another guideline to engage, or maybe they're saying it, asking for you to confirm it. So is another guideline to engage the decision maker early and throughout the LCA to maximize translation of LCA impacts and decision makers' decision attributes. So I think it's should we be including them early to do so, or do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, we always do include them early. We have our clients work with us throughout the whole process. We have regular meetings with them. We explain to them what we're doing and how things are progressing. So, and they participate very actively in sending data. So when we start a project, usually we have a very like newbie client that doesn't really understand what's going on. And by the end of the process, by the time we deliver the results, they are already like a lot more knowledgeable about the technique and what it requires and just how complex it is, and they appreciate the results. So and they're better prepared to communicate this within the company. Sometimes they also need help because results are complex, but we try to do as much as possible so that our clients will be able to, as we say it, graduate from us. We don't want eternal clients. I know it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous business model that makes no business sense. But we would be very happy if we had like one-time clients all the time, because that means that these clients like got everything they needed to continue their journey on their own. And if we get repeat clients, that's beautiful too. But we keep on trying to teach them as much as they need to make decisions on their own, because there's so much people that need help. We're just five, so so we kind of need them to graduate.
Thank you. This next question I can certainly relate to. I'm going to summarize it. So sometimes we have clients who like the pictorial, small more simplistic charts, and then we have clients who are very detail oriented. So do you have any advice in these cases where we need to show all of the details? Because as you can imagine, this can be challenging to deliver in a clear way when they want every single detail.
Well, in that case, we usually do like the general to specific, and then if they want more details, what we usually do is that we open the software and we show them, okay, what do you want to see? It cannot be more transparent.
Thank you. Oh, this one is exciting. So how do you balance being an objective modeler with helping your client make marketing arguments? And they added that they typically try to stay away from the marketing statements. Do you think they should or shouldn't? How do you go about that?
Well, I think that we don't really have a lot of time to change very radically the way that things are working on the planet. So it's about time we get out of that. For me, right? For me, for our team, it's like we're not gonna stick to that like very objective position where we are not relating to anything. Like there's something good to communicate. Communicate it. We're gonna help you find it. We're gonna help you do it because you need to be differentiated from your competitor who is not doing things so well, so that people are gonna buy to you. Because if they buy to you, the entire like impact of the system is going to go down. If we don't make, if our results don't result in any economic change, we have worked for nothing. It's not about getting paid for the contract. It's about changing economy. There's something much greater at stake. So we just keep on hammering the point until it gets done, you know? And when the world is back to a very stable condition, we're gonna go back to being very objective academics and not have so much fun. like, but right now it's a state of emergency. We need to help people get to the right places at the right time.
Thank you. So we only have two more questions. There are three open because one is more feedback, wonderful and very clear presentation. And then updating the image to include the equivalent is a great idea. So I'm going to get rid of that one, but now you have an answer to your question. And then we have two more for you. So the first is, do you think that it is important to communicate the basic limitations of LCA, such as, for instance, the fact that the impact or potential, the static evaluation of conventional LCA. So I'll go even further. Do you think it's important to communicate the limitations, and then how do you communicate them if you can do that in 2 minutes?
It's not just important, it is mandatory by the standard. You have to show the limitations, and we do that in every report. Even in the shorter reports that we write for the general audience, we put the limitations because they have to be informed about what these results are about and what they're not about, so that they can make decisions so that we can change economy. So we have to be transparent about that.
Thank you. And our last one, this is so impressive. We got through like 25 comments and questions. Thank you for this. So great presentation. And not me, the commoner is a communicator working at an LCA research group. The topic of the meeting is exactly what they do. However, they feel that they need to deepen their knowledge about the theory of all the different industries that they work with. Do you have any advice for them? And then I'll add any advice for this person and then any general advice in the next few minutes that you want to give the audience.
Well, if you really want to learn, I think it's just wonderful to go to the plants, to go to the production facilities. You learn a lot from doing that. You actually, you're visual, if you're a communicator, seeing the machines is going to help you tremendously. So if there is a budget in your team for doing that, I think it's going to be just amazing for you. That's the best advice. And the other one is like just listening and going to these kind of workshops and really listening and learning and to about the language and the jargon that we use so that you can communicate with this particular audience too, because you're right in the middle, right?
Thank you. Okay, I want to thank you, Pia, for answering all the questions, presenting such an amazing presentation. I know it's a lot of hard work in the last hour. And then thank you to the audience for joining us. And we're out of questions and we're out of time. So thank you, Pia.
Thank you so much for inviting us. It's been great, and we really hope that we added value to everyone. If you have any doubts, let's keep in touch. Those are the ways that you can reach me and us and the team. So Have a great day. Much success with your next LCA, and I hope that any of this helps you and your clients make better decisions.